Well, I am so excited for all of you because I have a very, very special treat. A friend of mine, Suzanne, who spends her time traveling, well, not right now, but like the rest of us, we're all trapped in our homes, but she spends her time traveling the world and interviewing, working with entrepreneurs, and she has done some incredible things in this world to make a difference. I am so looking forward for you to hear what she has to say about business owners and entrepreneurship and ethics and our economies. So let me start by introducing Suzanne, and then we'll get into a couple of questions, and then if you want to connect with her afterwards, I will let you know how you can do that. So Suzanne F. Stevens, conscious contribution cultivator and amplifier of social contributors' voices. She is a social entrepreneur, volunteer, and philanthropist. She provides keynotes, training, facilitation, panel moderation, interviews, and a woman's social impact leadership community. Just a few things on her plate. Suzanne has worked with Fortune 500 companies on 5 continents since 2000 and has interviewed leaders and entrepreneurs in 21 countries. She brings her business building insights and you, me, we ethos to small businesses and organizations internationally. Wow, Suzanne, I'm every time I talk with you, I'm just so impressed by the things that you've been able to do, and really grateful that you have the perception and the focus that you do, because you make such a huge difference in this world. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Barb. That's lovely. You've given me shivers.
That's good. That's good. Okay. So let's just quickly talk about a little bit about your past so that we can just get a feeling for some of the things that you've done before we go in and talk about the entrepreneurs and the people that you've spent your time with in the last few years, in the last 5 or 6 years on the 21 countries around the world. So you said that you've spent time with Fortune 500 countries, Fortune 500 companies in 5 continents. So tell us a little bit about what your life was like when you were doing this kind of work.
Well, we were focusing, I had a team of 6, and so we were a training and development company focusing on influential communications, particularly leadership, presentation skills, sales, negotiations. And we were helping organizations win business through how to influence stakeholders, how to engage those stakeholders, and also how to differentiate themselves. So we were flying internationally, working with diverse, from finance to manufacturing to media, to anybody who wanted to be more influential. And really, we all need the skills, right, to be influential, to move our careers forward. So it was a very rewarding time. But what was interesting about that time, although I had done it for 15 years, it filled organizations' pocketbooks, but it wasn't filling my soul anymore, which is why I actually made a shift. Right. And disbanded my team with money. They all left well, and many of them then took the licenses and bought licenses from me and continued with those organizations. And I went right. I did.
Right off the scale. Yeah. So you then went into, well, you talk about interviewing leaders and entrepreneurs, but you've done some soul searching to get to this place. So, what have you been doing over these 21 different countries? Where were you and how did you get started with this?
So to answer that in short as I possibly can, is I had went to Africa in 2007 and I heard a message, and I was with a group of 18 other women. So when I heard a message, the biggest problem in Africa is not poverty, education, urbanization, but the biggest problem is leadership. When moral leaders with integrity and justice arise, Africans' problems will be solved. I truly believe that's a message for the world, not just a message for the continent in Africa, but it stuck with me. The second thing that happened is I had the opportunity to meet a gentleman named Samuel, who was sharing with me that he needed fundraising skills, Well, because I trained presentation skills, and a key element of that is persuasion and raising funds or influencing one way or another, I decided to offer my skills to many of the PhD students and women leaders, and also profs at a school. And in doing so, something else happened. I wondered whose job I was taking. And in that process, I thought there must be people in Kenya, and I was in Kenya at this particular time, who would have the skill set to provide what I provide and make money from it rather than what I was doing for free. And in doing that, there was a third thing that also happened that led to the next phase, and that was working alongside and painting a school with teenage girls who were looking for mentors. So those three things really impacted me in a profound way, and I felt I didn't want to take a job. I knew we needed more leaders, and girls need mentors from their own culture. And as a result of that, a couple years later, when my soul wasn't being filled, and I knew it wasn't, and the recession hit, I thought, well, let's sell everything. And my husband alongside me left his leadership position, and we sold everything to interview African women pioneers with the goal of African women educating future African women leaders. But Barb, the reality is, as much as people watched it in 77 countries and do to this day, no one learned as much as I did.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're in it, but that is incredible. And you gave me shivers this time. That was, it's so impactful what you're doing. So cool. Very cool. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. I've told you a little bit about the students that are in this class, and they're all in mechanical engineering. There's a very large cohort of these students, and in this class, we're talking about entrepreneurship specifically, and with the background of ethics and an understanding of how our economies work. So when we're looking at the people that you're supporting, the African women and the mentoring the teenagers and whatnot, and how does ethics play in the parts of their relationships with each other, with their communities, with the leaders that have to bring business to their communities and whatnot? Like, how do you see ethics happening? Because I know you've shared some stories with me before, and they're all really great. So maybe you have one or two that came out of mind when you think of that, but let's just start with that.
So, yeah, I definitely will. And I just need some context around that. Is that I'll share some of the ethics in some countries that may not be Western countries, but we also have to recognize the fact that there's ethic challenges internationally.
Yeah.
And I need to say that. That being said, I focus my work now on businesses in the West. And the African businesses were inspirations, but once I saw those challenges they had there, I also saw them mirrored in the West, just different degrees. So I need to say that. So as far as ethics goes, the best way I can describe it, particularly in the 17 of the 54 countries I was interviewing in, is we often assume in developing countries there's a lot of corruption, and I wouldn't suggest that there isn't a lot of corruption, but I'm not going to suggest that everyone is corrupt, which is actually why I focused on women leaders, is because a lot of those women leaders that I interviewed demonstrated that they would not be swayed, even though circumstances suggest their success was pending on them being unethical. They operated within the context of their own integrity at all costs. And two people I particularly think of is Du Apani, which is a woman in Swaziland, and Teresa Maberi, who was in Uganda. These both women, because they operated their businesses, their advocacy, their initiatives, be it nonprofit or profit, were always ethical, that eventually presidents came to them, or in Swaziland, it's a king. But they came to them because I truly believe that when you, as a business owner or an engineer or anybody in leadership, if you operate ethically, people will gravitate towards you. They may not like you at first, because you will be the one who asks the tough questions. And I think, be it in associations or whatever you're doing in your volunteer initiatives or in your organization, if you are the one that stands by your personal values and the ethics of society and ask the tough questions, people will find you annoying, but they will also find you inspiring, and they will also come to you when they don't know the answers. And I say this from a business standpoint, but I also say it because many engineers will be involved in associations. And something I don't know if you know, Barb, but I've done a ton of work with engineers in my career. And so the international stage to engineers internationally, as well as in across Canada, in Ontario. And there's opportunity for engineers to be unethical. Oh, yeah. And particularly, and you look in South Africa, you look at a lot of the questions that these individuals get asked. And the key to ethics is engaging the community in your solutions, making sure that you are listening and that you're asking the questions of the community so you have them as an ally and a collaborator in executing your solutions. You're smart as an engineer, you wouldn't get this degree, but the reality is if you're in a silo, you will be very lonely and you'll only grow so much in the engineering community. Because the reality, engineers grow when they connect with others.
I love that.
And is where I've seen all the engineers I've ever worked with grow. Until they master the art of communication, the art of collaboration, the art of project management, that is when they will excel and grow up the corporate ladder and the income ladder as well.
Yeah, I love that you made us recognize that, you know, this is not ethics is not a problem in one country or a type of sociology or culture or something like that. It's everywhere. And to be ethical is sometimes difficult. Sometimes you have to go against the grain because everybody thinks that, you know, doing this one way is the right way to do it, and it really isn't. And it's hard to be an ethical person. So I love that there's an idea that there's a group of people, in this case women, who are actually being able to lead their communities into an ethical behavior and bring that to their society and hopefully their country. So does the king like her?
Well, yeah. I want to add two more things that I think will be important to your audience, if I may.
Yes.
One of them is, this is not a sex thing either. It just happens that I interviewed women. That being said, and that's to escalate that voice, which is suppressed in many African countries. So just context for that. But two things. One of the reasons these women were ethical is because when you have a mission beyond yourself, and when you are in service of others, to be unethical would be contradictory to your mission. And therefore, for your engineers, going on that journey of what's important to you. There's your career, but there's also what you care about. If you can attach what you care about and attach a mission, be it personal or professional, and you align those things, all of a sudden you attach values to that. And those values stick to them under all circumstances. And I love what one of the women in Uganda that I interviewed had real challenges with the bureaucracy. And what she did was she looked at what was the governments or the organizations or who's ever the higher, who's putting parameters around you. Think about what are their priorities. Now, look at their priorities. Ask them their questions. So if you're with your organization, what are your organization's priorities? Align with those priorities, but only align with the ethical priorities. And decide what you can bring to the table and how you can serve that priority in line with your personal values and your ethical values. Because keep something in mind, this is really important. Values are three things. They're your ethical values, they're your religious values, and your personal values. Your ethical values and your religious values, you choose. Your personal values choose you. So when you're feeling tension within yourself, if there's ever that time when you're feeling sort of anxious, like something's not right, your personal values are being compromised. Listen to that, because that's where regret comes from, is when you don't fall in line, and it gives you an opportunity to say, why is this situation bothering me? And it's usually you're having problems or being confronted with your personal values and ethics. So you need to listen to yourself. You know the right thing to do. Don't ignore it.
I love that. And I've never looked at it as three different types of values. Two things that we've done in class that align with what you said. One is that at the very beginning of their classes, we started with personal values. So everybody had an opportunity to go through a process to evaluate their own personal values and get an understanding of how those values might align with entrepreneurship. And it's interesting to know that many of these students are aligned with entrepreneurship and interested with it. A lot of classes that I teach are not necessarily interested in getting, but they have to take it because it's one of the courses that they have to take. So we got entrepreneurs, they have a list of values, and then we were talking about sales process. And that idea of, that pushy salesperson that, makes you feel yucky. If you don't want to be that person, you need to keep in alignment with your own personal values and ensure that you're supporting people or helping them make a decision as opposed to pushing them into something that you need to sell. So that's, it brings it back to what you said, brings it back to what they've already had to go through in this class, but it also aligns with how they have to act moving forward. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
And it's interesting what you're saying. And again, you're kind of going into my sweet spot there with the sales piece, being that working with organizations for 20 years. And it really is, if I can share a piece of advice to particularly anybody who isn't pursuing a role in sales, any professional services, it's just a conversation and really listening to what people value. So I love that you focused on values. Find out what people value and listen to it, and then give them what they're asking for in line with your ethics, of course, and your personal values. But we all have them. And if you understand what people value, then you're creating a conversation, and it's just extracting those values. And that's what people say yes to. They say yes to your knowledge, but you have to get them to your knowledge. And you do that by listening and making it all about them and what they care about. So it's just a conversation. And really I don't care if you're selling cars, you're selling engineering, you're selling accounting, media, it's just a conversation about listening and understanding what somebody else wants.
Yeah. Or selling yourself in an interview. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So here's a question for you. So in Canada, we still have a lot of inequities. We've already talked, there is ethical challenges in every industry, in every social and cultural groups. And of course, here in Canada, although we're known as a fairly ethical culture in general, worldwide, there is still a lot of problems. And in the business areas, what makes starting a business and running a business difficult for some people? And how do women overcome this ethically? And I'm talking women because you actually interview a lot of women, but you've dealt with a lot of people in both women and men. And so overcome ethical and inequality in these issues. And how do we get past this? Maybe you don't know that answer, but if you have a guess, that would be great.
Well, so what I can share with you is there's a shift amongst us, and this has nothing to do with COVID. COVID has actually just enhanced it, but it was happening before COVID. And social enterprises, for example, have been around for years. And when I say a social enterprise, it's the meeting of social impact and profit. Mm-hmm. And one over the other doesn't exist. So it's having like a triple bottom line, people, planet, profit. All three of those things are extremely important. Now, why I bring this up is this is how African women have operated for decades. And in the West, there's books about 20 years ago that were coming out about social enterprises. But it is not until the last 5 years that this conversation has escalated. And organizations are talking about consciousness. They're talking about how to lead with consciousness, which, by the way, I talk about as well and speak and teach. And talking about how to structure organizations so that we are having the impact on society. We're taking what used to be a profit-driven and actually challenging what our role in society should be. And there's a responsibility for entrepreneurs. They have a responsibility to serve society, not just to be profit-driven. And that conversation is escalated. There are so many organizations, and my You, Me, We community, which focuses on women driving social change, is doing the same thing. But there's B corporations are measuring, and I encourage anybody who starts in entrepreneurship is to go to B Corp, hosted by B Lab, where they actually measure your contribution to all stakeholders involved. So that would be your collaborators, your suppliers, your employees, and how you contribute to that community becomes extremely important. And you are measured, and if you are a certified B Corp, you also can collaborate with like-minded people. So that value exercise that you went through, they will actually take you through that value exercise. So for example, I just interviewed a woman on wisdomexchangetv.com who was looking for funding. Where did she go? She's a B corporation. She went to B Corps. And she already knows that they have the same values as she has. And similarly, the people that did give her the funding, which was not a donation, it was an investment in her business. They did that investment because they knew she had the same values as they did. So a lot of that work is actually being done by being part of organizations that have similar values. So I would highly recommend, in addition to being in your engineering community, which I am a huge advocate to be, because they hire me, and people like you, Barb. So also because you also should look at other organizations that have the same values and business practices so that you can collaborate with them and learn from them as well. This is not going away. And with the pandemic, these social gaps, marginalized people, vulnerable people, those gaps have widened. And entrepreneurs have a responsibility to serve society. And there's a way of going through that process, and that's what my book helps out with, is what you care about. It could be engineers, but it could be something else that your business actually benefits. How do you engage your employees so they feel part of something bigger than themselves? Because millennials and Xers and Ys and Zs, they want to have more purpose in their work. Mm-hmm. So if you are not a purpose-focused organization, you're going to have a challenge retaining those individuals in your organization because they want to feel mentally challenged, that they're contributing to the leadership and that they're being heard and that their soul is also being met. This is the way business is going. And it's been going that way, and it's escalated substantially in the next 5 years. And the pandemic has shown us how interconnected we actually are. And we can't do it alone. So we must take advantage of our responsibility And we can't rely on governments to do it. We need to rely on small businesses and the business community, because it is more trusted than anything else we have in society.
Very cool. Wow. And I love the shift that's been, well, accentuated through the pandemic, if you want, but over the last 4 or 5 years, just watching this shift show up in general media now, that large corporations are actually talking about it at the top levels. And I think the shift also happens as our upper management changes from to the next generations, because we speak differently, we've lived differently, we had different focuses for our lives. So I think that as we bring in the younger generations, the older generations change and take up that, and it accelerates. So I love it. Thank you. So yep.
I know, Barb, this is just because you brought it up, and I
you can't help it.
I think it's really important also and then I'll leave you to it, but corporate social responsibility has been there for years, and your engineers are going to join probably organizations to start before they become entrepreneurs, or at least that's what I would recommend, in order to get their feet wet, to learn on somebody else's dime. That being said, corporate social responsibility has changed drastically as well, where it used to be often a PR, we're doing this for PR reasons. Now there's an engagement of employees in the execution of the corporate social responsibility. It's no longer just about we're looking good. It's about collaborating internally. It's about feeling good. It has made a shift as well. If you're just doing it for PR reasons, you're not doing it well enough, and it will not last. You need the engagement of your employees in order for it to execute. And here's the challenge with that, is not all employees care about the same thing. That's where I'm working with organizations on helping them to create a culture of conscious contributions that appeals to all employees. And that is where the challenge actually ends up lying.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you so much for being here today. So let me start with, I'm just going to hold up your book so people have an opportunity to look at this. And I wanted to let people know, because this is really important. A lot of people don't think about how they can contribute. They write a book and they think to themselves, oh, I wrote a book and someone's going to know something about me. But what does Suzanne do? She donates 5% of all your book sales go to higher education scholarships for women in Africa. Oh, nice. And how much have you, because you've donated quite a bit so far, and you've given educations to several different women. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, and I'd love to say we've done more, but we've done it in a number of different. So 27 women have gone through tertiary education, so higher education, with the goal of creating future leaders. More leaders transform societies. So we do that, but we also donate to small enterprises and education through a Kiva program. When people promote on our site, if they make their contribution count, they want to celebrate someone, they put it on our site at make your contribution count campaign, and they just post, and then I donate $1 every time someone does that. Part of my speaking, I donate part of my speaking to our foundation. So there's always, it is baked into the business. It is part of our social consciousness. And then of course, I talk about how to contribute. So everything stays in line, and that's ethics and authenticity, which is also an important part of ethics.
Oh, love it. Thank you for what you do. That's amazing. Okay, so the last thing that I'd like to ask you then is, how can people, one, contribute, and two, connect with you if they need to? So how can, if our people on the call today are listening and going, I really would love to be able to help Suzanne out. I want to know what she's doing. I want to follow you. I want to, whatever that is.
So it's such a great question, and there's many ways to answer it, but with how you can contribute to me is to contribute to yourself. And how that is buy a book, because 5% is contributing to higher education for women in developing countries, which will transform those countries. At the same time, you're going to go on a journey of self-reflection, understanding what you care about. You'll go on a journey also of understanding the consciousness of your impact, because giving is not an answer. And that's what I put on its head in this book. We put so much emphasis on giving in the West, but we don't put enough emphasis on how to consciously contribute, which looks at the impact of our giving. And as you know, Barb, as the first part of the book is about how to consciousness, so that you're aware of what little or a lot, it could be just giving $1 on the street. What are you actually doing? It forces you to think about it. And then ultimately the book will tell you how to sustain it. As an entrepreneur or someone working in an organization, you'll gain all kinds of leadership strategies, collaboration strategies on how to make your contribution count. For you, me, we. So that would be the best way to contribute not only to my foundation, but also to yourself and your own growth. And you can get that at youmewe.ca/book, and that will take you to the purchase page. And what's really fun, and Barb, you know this because you're part of one, is get a group of you to do the book, read the book together, because at the end of each chapter, there's questions that take you everywhere. They take you to Africa, but most importantly, they take you to what's happening in our backyard right now. And you get to learn about your friends and your colleagues in a way that you couldn't possibly learn about them. So it's also a collaboration tool and a connection tool. And during the pandemic, let's face it, we all can use a little love and connection.
That's so true. So true. Well, thank you for being here and sharing your time with us. I know how crazy busy you've been, even though we're all locked in our homes and everything. And I'm really glad that you had time to share with us.
Great. And you can get me at youmewe.ca. Sorry, I didn't answer your question.
So we at
youmewe.ca. Make it easy.
All right. I'll make sure that I share that so that you can see it online. All right. Thank you so much. And we will see you again soon.